Is it actually possible that I could be addicted to prednisone? Stay tuned. We're going to talk about that today. Well, hey, folks, my name is Jim Merle, and I want to thank you so much once again for joining me today on our program, the Transplant Helper Podcast / YouTube video series. Today, I want to beg the question of myself and others, is it actually possible that I could be addicted to prednisone? You know, typically when we think about addiction, we think about people being addicted to sleep aids or pain pills or some kind of illicit drug that's sold on the streets. But is it possible to be addicted to a drug like prednisone? Now, we discussed prednisone on a previous program. I'll try to link to it somewhere around this video. And we talked about it from the perspective of it being the devil's drug. In the transplant life, the transplant world that we live in, we might consider it the devil's pill, if you will. And that's simply because we do not enjoy the side effects, the irritability, the mood swings, the insomnia, the tremors, the jerks, all that comes with it, make it a very, very difficult drug to live with. But yet at the same time, it's so important in our transplant treatments, we have to take it. I emphasized on that previous program also that it is used in us as transplants, not just as a pick-me-up, but as an immunosuppressant that helps to keep our organs from rejecting in our bodies. And of course, it's typically an anti-inflammatory drug that may be used to fight off infections, that may be used to fight off rashes of the skin, and even to used as a pick-me-up if you have a common cold when you go into the doctor on a short-term usage. But for us as transplant patients, it's much more important than that. So therefore, we're typically put on it on a very long-term use basis, and typically we may be put on that drug prednisone for a lifetime usage basis, and that's where most of us are. As a matter of fact, if you've gotten to a point post-transplant, maybe 2, 3, 4 years out, and you've gotten down to 5 milligrams of that drug, you're on what they would call a maintenance dosage, and that's probably where you're going to stand for the duration of your life. And that's unfortunate, but generally speaking, that's kind of a tolerable dosage. Generally speaking, you may have started out at 75 or 65 milligrams of that. So when you get down to 5 milligrams, it's much more manageable, much easier to live with. So if you've gotten down to 5 milligrams, or maybe sometimes in more rare cases, 2.5 milligrams, maybe that 5 milligram pill broke in half, be thankful for that. Be so thankful for that. And that's where I've been now for several months, at least, I think 4 or 5 months. But I received a call last week. It was last Wednesday, so almost a week ago to the time of this video, from my transplant coordinator, where she reminded me of something we had discussed about a year ago in my care, and that was that I was going to be given an opportunity on a trial basis to come off of prednisone altogether. And of course, when I heard that news, and she offered it to me last Wednesday to come off of it altogether, 0 milligrams, I was excited. I was elated. I couldn't wait on that opportunity that had afforded me. And so I tossed the bottle. You know, I was ready for that. No more side effects. Get off the prednisone and let's get this trial started. And it's going to be for about a month or so. It may be further than that, but I go back in a month and have another biopsy. And if things are clear because of my history, I may stay off of it permanently. And of course, many people have messaged me and commented and asked on Twitter and Facebook and below that previous video and such, how did you get to that? Well, that's a long story, but it basically comes down to 2 things. One, my match was extremely good, extraordinarily good, to the extent, too, that I've been involved in a 2-year-long study by my transplant center, which was coordinated and conducted by infectious disease, where they actually looked into my match and how great it was, and trying to decide, you know, on trial basis, what medications may be back down to very extremely low doses and or dropped. And I'm kind of a, if you will, a crash test dummy for the rest of you. So maybe you don't need to be so envious, because I'm kind of treading fresh waters, but again, I'm thankful. So nonetheless, prednisone was dropped on last Wednesday, almost a week ago, or will be a week ago tomorrow. So I was excited. That's where I stood last week. But then came Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then today, Monday, I came off of that medicine and I began to feel terrible. Quite crummy, as someone would say. I began to feel awful. and I couldn't understand it. I felt like I had no energy. I felt like I had no strength. I would have periods of weakness and dizziness and lightheadedness and all of this. And immediately the only thing I could figure is that either one, I was dehydrated, which we're going to talk about dehydration later on in this particular series, so come back for that. Or, and this is what I was really beginning to consider, that somehow my body had become addicted to prednisone. Is it possible for your body to be addicted to prednisone? That's what I was wondering. And so I actually considered on yesterday and the day before calling my coordinator and saying, look, I was excited about getting off prednisone, but I feel terrible. I'm not able to function up to the level I want to. So let's just put that back on and don't worry about it. I'll take my 2.5 milligrams and move on with life. That's where I was up until last night. But then it hit me. Then I started to draw some conclusions, and I'm going to share those with you now. What I have decided is that, yes, in some ways my body was addicted to prednisone, but not in the typical manner. Not like you would be addicted to a pain pill or a sleep aid or something like that. It was not a withdrawal situation. It works something like this. If you'll remember back, or if you've not been exposed to this yet, I'm giving you some warning about it. When you're put on prednisone for a long-term basis or a high dosage type basis, now this could even occur to you if you go into your general practitioner and they give you this for the common cold or for the rash as a pick-me-up, but especially as transplant patients. When you're put on the higher dosages of prednisone for longer-term basis, you have to be very, very cautious to watch your blood sugars. Even if you're not a diabetic per se, you have to be very, very cautious to watch your blood sugars, because what it comes as a side effect of prednisone, which, by the way, I did not mention in that episode, The Devil's Drug, is that it can quickly, very quickly elevate your blood sugars. It can quickly do that. Now, what happens, which is actually surprising and kind of a mystery even to the medical field, is that in doing so, it doesn't do it immediately. Like you take your prednisone in the morning, say at 9 a.m., your blood sugars will not shoot up immediately. No, typically what will happen is you'll take your prednisone at 9 a.m. if that's when you choose to do so, and then around lunchtime, your blood sugars will start climbing, and they'll kind of climb and hit a peak, and then they'll dip, and they'll climb and hit a peak and dip, and it kind of does that, and it really doesn't have a lot to do with when you took the prednisone or when you ate your meals. It just kind of rises and falls. And so I began to think back, and I thought back to the days just post-transplant when I was having to take insulin shots and all of this to try to bring my blood sugars down from the 2 and the 300 range and all, when the dosages were 60 milligrams and more, and how terrible that was. But I began to think about now about the weakness and the fatigue and the dizziness and the lightheadedness, and I began to think, Jim, are your blood sugars low? Well, that's when I set out yesterday, kind of during the course of the day, to 3 or 4 different times checking my blood sugars. Now, this is unrelated to meals, unrelated to anything else, just when I would feel my worst, which I noticed yesterday, this was coming and going. When I would check my blood sugars, they would be low. Now, let me say in this, and I'll have another episode on this later, you need to know your own body. Now, for me, a blood sugar of under 100, particularly under 90, I feel terrible. Now, the average and the standards, if you want to look this up on the internet, most people will tell you that a blood sugar between about 70 and 100 is normal. That's a normal, if you will, between meal blood sugar, but that's not the case for me. If my blood sugar goes below 100 or especially below 90, I feel like I'm going to pass out, like I'm just going to die. And so what I started to notice yesterday is that when I would hit these low moments, which there were more low moments than highs, and it would come and go very, very quickly, unrelated to meals, unrelated to drinking or eating anything, what I began to notice is my blood sugar would be like 82, 84, 86, and it came and it went. It would spike up and down and up and down. And I thought about those days just post-transplant, how high it was, and I realized this. I had stopped taking my prednisone again. Last Wednesday was my last day to take it. I felt terrible Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. By last night, it clicked. Without the prednisone, without it, my blood sugars were not going to be high. They were going to be low. And they were going to be lower than normal. And so yesterday, even after eating good breakfast, is that a word? A good breakfast, a good lunch, a good, we call it supper in the South, but dinner. After eating 3 solid meals and snacks in between, even with that, my blood sugars were down in the low 80s, which for me, again, that may be different from you. My wife can tolerate blood sugars in the 40s and feel fine. Not me. Below 90, I feel awful. My blood sugar was low. So yes, in a sense, my body has become addicted to prednisone, in that I need the prednisone to raise my blood sugar so I can better manage my body's own blood sugar. Now, what am I going to do? Am I going to call the doctor and try to get some sort of a pill to help to raise my blood sugar? No. Am I going to start eating cakes and drinking orange juice constantly and chocolate milk or whatever else, eating candies? No, I probably won't do that. I'm going to eat a little bit extra during my meals, that sugar wise. I usually keep a low sugar diet. I'm going to eat a little extra here and there. I'm going to eat smaller meals and more frequent. I'm kind of going to go back to what I was doing pre-transplant and try to balance my blood sugars. That's the best suggestion I have now. And if things get worse, I'll consult my doctor then. I don't plan on getting back on prednisone if I can help it. But I also don't plan on feeling crummy for the rest of my life. Now, this is something I thought might really help you. So again, if you're going on to prednisone, maybe you've never been on it before, look out. Your blood sugars are going to go up. But if you're coming off, they very well may go down. Your body, yes, it's sort of addicted, but not in the typical way. I appreciate you spending time with me today on the Transplant Helper podcast / YouTube video series. I hope you'll watch all the videos in the series if you have a chance. I hope many of them will be beneficial to you. If they are, how about hit that like button? Give me a like. That helps an awful lot. And certainly, if you can, subscribe. That way you'll be notified when all of these videos come out. You can find us on the web at thetransplanthelper.com. And if you need to ask any questions at all, the comments box is great. You'll see my Twitter handle up in the corner, or reach out to me any way that you'd like. I just want to help. Until next time, friends, stay stronger.